How dangerous he was. I wish I could do it all over. Or worst, I should have voted. Look, this can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election.
And with President Trump's increasing attacks against mail-in voting, President Obama with this urgent warning.
Do not let them take away your power. Do not let them take away your democracy.
And we're joined now for further analysis of what's going on with the DNC by Dr. Jennifer Victor. Dr. Victor is an associate professor of political science at George Mason University, and she's a former contributor to this very program when she worked at the University of Pittsburgh, where she taught political science. Welcome back. How are you? You miss us here in Pittsburgh?
Wonderful to see you. It's great to be back.
All right. So what do you think of the remarks that were made last night by former President Obama? Did he violate any unwritten rule by criticizing a sitting president?
I don't think so. I think one of the jobs that the Democratic Party has needed to accomplish over the course of this convention is to make their case to the American people about why they should elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in a way that is a message that's more than just anti-Trump. And so figuring out what those themes and what that big message is going to be has been their goal. And what really seems to come through last night, as I think was emphasized in that series of clips you just showed, is that their theme is, the Democrats' theme is save democracy, that democracy is on the line, and that the ways in which, a lot of this went unstated, but certainly the ways in which President Trump has violated a series of traditional democratic norms and values put democracy on an unsteady footing. And so their message is to simply persuade people that that's not okay.
But I wonder if that message will resonate with the voters. Mr. Trump has legions of people who support him, and just saying that he's a bad president may not be enough. Shouldn't the Democrats be talking about what they will do for the voters?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I do expect that as the campaign goes on over the next couple of months, we will hear more about some issues. We've heard some of that through the Democratic convention. There's a big segment on gun violence last night, on violence against women, and on climate change and so forth. So I do think we will get to some issues. But, the political parties right now are pretty far apart on a lot of issues. And so it is a way to emphasize difference between the two. And I agree with you. Donald Trump has a pretty strong core of supporters that I don't think, some certain percentage of them I don't think can be persuaded away from him. But it's interesting in historical perspective, usually when a president runs for re-election, it's a referendum on the president, and typically presidents win, especially one-term presidents who've served one term in office where that's the first, where their party has just come into office. So Republicans took the White House over from Democrats in 2016. They've been in the White House for 4 years. Almost always in the modern presidency under that condition, a president will get reelected. The only time a first-term president didn't get reelected after winning the White House for one term in the last, since FDR really, is Jimmy Carter. So by all historical standards, Trump should get reelected. But I think the pandemic makes everything different. Between the ineffective federal government response to the pandemic, the way that it's affected all aspects of society, and particularly the economy, really makes the Republicans more vulnerable and gives Democrats an opening in 2020.
But Dr. Victor, I read a lot of national polls that tell me that the lead that Mr. Biden has over President Trump is narrowing. President Trump is being able to close that gap with a lot of people who are going to vote. Is that enough? Should the Democrats be listening to their progressive wing that says that 9 out of 10 Democrats favor national health care through some sort of program? They're not talking about any of those issues.
Yeah, we haven't heard much about healthcare during the course of this convention. I wonder if it might come up more tonight. We'll have to see in this last night of the convention, where it'll sort of be the Joe Biden show. So that's a great question. But it's worthwhile to remember that it's just mid-August, and so we got to buckle up for a long campaign. Biden has been shown to be ahead in polls, and traditionally, presidential candidates get a bit of a bump after the convention. We'll see if that's true this year. It's an odd year for a lot of reasons. The Republican convention is coming up. So we should expect that gap to narrow and for the election to be competitive, as, again, an incumbent president has an advantage. And Trump has a core of supporters. And so this isn't a slam dunk for either candidate.
Well, it looked like it certainly was a great night for women, with Kamala Harris accepting the nomination, a number of prominent Democratic women making remarks. What can you say about the ascendancy of women within the party?
Yeah, this was both a opportunity for Democrats to highlight a historic victory, both in terms of nominating a woman of color to a national ticket, and also in terms of recognizing the centennial of the women's right to vote being protected at the national level with the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment that we're celebrating the 100 years just this year. So we saw a great hat tip to those accomplishments last night. But I think the larger point to be made about why women are being so highlighted is more of a strategic one on behalf of the Democratic Party, because basically there is a gender gap in the United States in party politics, and Democrats have a 5 to 10 point advantage over Republicans in attracting women to support their candidates. And what we're seeing is that Democrats are taking advantage of that and doubling down and really trying to persuade women that the Democratic Party is their party, particularly women of color. That's been really noticeable from the Democratic Party over the course of the convention.
You mentioned COVID and the impact it's had. What impact has it had on these virtual conventions? No balloon drops. They're highly and slickly produced, but I don't know if they're reaching people. Are the viewerships down when it comes to this DNC so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually haven't seen any data on viewership yet, so I'll be very curious when we get some numbers on that. But typically, people who watch political party conventions that happen quadrennially are people who are pretty tuned into politics anyway. Some regular folks may turn in for one or two big speeches, but generally what we see is it's the diehard political junkies like me who tune into these things. So the conventions are certainly meaningful, and COVID makes a huge difference. I do think the Democrats have done a number of innovative things that might stick. There's been a huge amount of positive response about that super adorable roll call that they did going around to each of the states and the territories. People really seemed to connect with that in a personal way. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that sticks when all of this is over.
I just wonder if the Democrats can out-Republican the Republicans by leaning over to their side. Last time around in 2016, they lost a number of traditional labor votes and others who went over to the Trump campaign and voted for him. And it seems to me that they're leaning in that direction, away from national health care and trying to talk about gun violence and other kinds of things in order to out-Republican the Republicans, and I don't know if that's a winning strategy.
That's a fair point, but like I said, I think conventions are mostly about firing up the base. Sure, some of it is trying to introduce the candidates and make a case to all of America, but most of America isn't really watching, and most of what they're trying to do is make sure that the base of the Democratic Party is really fired up to get out there and spend the next couple of months mobilizing voters. And so I think that's most of what we see. The other thing to notice is that the candidate that they're nominating, that the Democrats are nominating this year in Joe Biden, is a pretty traditional, we've got a older white male who's been a long time in politics. This is at least his third time running for president. And he's not a hardliner. He's not an extremist or a hardcore progressive. He has leaned more moderate, but also comes across as a folksy, open, welcoming guy who wants to converse with all sorts of people about issues and address problems from a multidimensional standpoint and try to build.
Let me interrupt you because we only have a minute left. The president has criticized him as sleepy Joe Biden. Are we likely to see a lot of mudslinging like that? Because if you look at what's gone on so far with the DNC, there's been a lot of Trump bashing. Will that fire up the base, as you say?
Unfortunately, the age that we live in now, where we have this extreme partisan polarization in our politics, suggests that both parties can gain some advantage by attacking the other party and helping their own partisans to feel like the other partisans are dangerous to them. And so I do think, unfortunately, that we should buckle up and expect a pretty nasty campaign in terms of mudslinging and insults and so forth. I'd like to say that it's otherwise, but unfortunately, that's probably how it's going to go.
All right, Dr. Victor, we appreciate your commentary on these issues, and perhaps in the next 80-some-odd days, we will talk again.
Be happy to. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. All right, I'm Chris Moore. Our program will continue in a moment. We'll take a look at colleges as students try to return